With the release of Spiritforge, a lot of people are getting into Riftbound. However, most people don't want to be spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on just the meta deck like Draven, Ezreal, Aurelia. So, in this video, we're going to give you 3 decks that are easy to make but also relatively strong that won't break the bank. We have a Discord community where we talk about all things Riftbound, link in the description down below. Let's jump right into it. So, with the 3 decks that we have, we're going to go into the strategy, amount of cards we have, what you can put in it, and also how you can change it up and upgrade it if you want to be playing a little bit more stronger of a deck. The first deck that we have is Fiora. Fiora states that when one of your units become mighty, you may exhaust me to channel one rune exhausted. This deck is really easy to make because if you just buy the 3 structured decks, you realistically only have to add like a couple more decks or a couple more cards to make the deck viable to where it is right now. For the chosen champion, we're playing one Fiora worthy. It says when you control a unit that becomes mighty, you may pay 1 power to ready it. This becomes your engine because she's one of the cards in your deck that is able to make things go fast and accelerate, which is very useful. We're playing Trifarian Warcamp because we're gonna have running a lot of 4 might unit that goes into 5 might by moving into Trifarian, which makes him mighty, which triggers Fiora's legend ability. Playing Sunken Temple because when you move a unit in with Mighty, you can pay 1 energy to be able to draw 1 card, and draw is always good. Then you have Obelisk of Power, which is a generic good going second battlefield. Now, we're running 3 copies of Punch First, 1 Death Grip, 2 Doran's Blade, 3 Pit Rookie, 3 Sea Monkeys, 3 Unsung Hero, 1 Challenge, 3 Hidden Blade, 1 Salvage, 3 Riposte, 1 more extra copy of Fiora Worthy, 3 Illusion Merciless, 2 Akshan Mischievous, 3 BF Swords, 3 Fiora Victorious, 3 Set Brawlers, and 1 Ruin Armor. And for the sides, we have 2 Sabotages, 2 Unyielding Spirits, 1 Salvage, 1 more copy of Akshan Mischievous, a Rune Runner, and a Divine Judgment. Now, the overall strategy of the deck is to be able to use high value cards like Punch First, Doran's Blade, Riposte, as well as BF Swords to be able to make your units mighty, which triggers Fiora's passive legend ability. We're also running really strong cards that can become mighty by themselves, such as Set Brawler. Set Brawler is, I would say, a core of the deck because the moment you play him, he pays their energy by himself because he puts a buff on himself, which becomes mighty. But not only that, though, when you expend his buff to give him +4 this turn, his ability goes on the chain. You go down to 4 might because you get rid of the buff, and then you add back 4 might to it, which makes him mighty again. So Set's just a really, really good card to be able to constantly trigger your Fiora legend. Overall, this deck is very strong because with access to Riposte, you essentially get a counter spell. And even though it is 2 energy, once again, once you become mighty, you're able to get 1 more energy or 1 more rune back due to Fiora's legend ability. Now, we are running 9 2 costs. We have Pit Rookie, Sea Monkey, and Unsung Hero. In this game, you want to be able to hit your 2 costs, and Sea Monkey is just a really good card because he can be a 2 cost and a 3 cost, so he fills the gap really nicely because ideally having 9 2-drops in your deck usually will guarantee you getting a 2-drop in the beginning, which is very good. Overall, the strategy is very strong. It's very, very consistent. It does what the deck wants to do. Also, the Rune Runner comes in clutch against spells. There's a lot of purple going around, which is why Rune Runner is the sleeper OPE card, and I really like to have it in the deck. We're running Sabotages for cards like Dazzling, Spell Decks, against the mirror. Same thing with Unyielding Spear. This is good against kill spells such as Singularities, Falling Stars, all that fun stuff. We're also running an extra copy of Akshan because Akshan is just good if you need more gear hate. Another copy of Rune Runner if you're coming countering into a lot of purple decks or red kill spell decks. And then 1 single copy of Divine Judgment to be able to get over anything big because Fiora in play from behind, but also gets a lot of value because he has gears and can regain tempo quite fast even with the Divine Judgment. The sides are kind of more up to you, what you prefer, and also just kind of what's more relevant in the meta. I will say that potentially having Sabotage on main deck could be correct, but I prefer to keep it in the side. So this here is the Fiora Grand Duelist deck. All you really need is 3 structure decks, and the only cards you kind of have to add are, if I'm not mistaken, the Fiora Victorious, the Set Brawlers, Rune Runners, I believe, and Auctions. But for the most part, the cards you get are already really good, especially the Riposte. Now, with the second deck. The second deck is a Rumble deck. Same thing, Rumble you can get in a structured deck, and you can just buy 3 of the structured decks, or just 2 to get the cards that you need. Now, his legend states that your mechs have shield, so you get +1 while they're defenders. And we're running Rumble Scrapper as our chosen champion. Your mechs have +1, including me. When you hold, play a 3 might mech unit token to your base. Now, we're running Obelisk of Power, same thing we were second, really good. We're doing Trifarian Warcramp, +1 here because you really like to stack up one battlefield and get really big. And then we're also running Vile Maw Lair to be able to deal with any of the Draven decks with the fighter flights and movement in general. And the reason why Vile Maw is so good is because you're able to gank over later with some really strong cards. So with this deck, ooh, technically missing a card. Let's add back one more card to make it good. One more. There you go. So we're running 3 copies of Blood Rush, 3 Retreat, Stupefy, 2 Danger Zone, 3 Forecaster, 3 Gem Jammers, 3 Raven Blooms, 1 Bushwhack, 3 Bubble Bot, 2 Rumble Hot Headed, 3 Production Surge. I think, I thought I had one more. 3, 2, 2. 3 copies of Rumble Scrapper, 3 copies of Pharaoh's Forerunner, 3 copies of Sly Slitter, 3 copies of Breakneck Mech, and then for the sideboard we have 2 Cleaves, 2 Against the Odds, 2 Thermal Beams, and 2 Brynn here. Now, the core of this deck is to be able to put out your mech as fast as possible, take control of one battlefield, and try to hold for dear life. Rumble is able to give you +1 for mechs overall. This gives you +1 when you're defending, and then you also have Rumble Hothead to give you +1 when you're attacking. So overall, you're getting a lot of value with your mechs. The reason why I like this deck so much and why I find it so strong is it's because it's able to just get over anything massive because you just have a lot of might on board with your Rumble Legend, Rumble Scrapper, as well as just Rumble Hothead. Now, we're running 3 Sky Splitters because it's very easy for you to get your mechs to 8 might, 6 might relatively easily. And then this card only sometimes costs usually 1 or 2 energy with 1 power to deal 5 damage to you at a battlefield. Or if you have a Breakneck Mech on defense, or even with a Rumble Scrapper on board, the Sky Splitter essentially becomes free. Now, this deck runs Ravenbloom only because there isn't really any other 2-drop that really works with the Rumble deck, because you want to have 9 2-drops ideally. The reason why I play Ravenbloom is because we're playing Blood Rush as well as Danger Zone as well as Stupefy to be able to amp. We have 2 Cleaves on the side. Technically, you could replace the Cleaves instead of Blood Rush depending on what you prefer. I like Cleave better, but you can swap those in and out depending on what you prefer. 3 Retreats is just really useful only because if there's a lot of kill spell going around, being able to ramp 1 and protect your unit is also very, very nice. This deck is relatively easy to play because the biggest thing that you're trying to do is you're trying to swarm the field with mechs and just hold a battlefield and just gain more value through Rumble Hothead, Rumble Scrapper, and Pharaoh's Forerunner. This deck is a little bit more on the weaker side because you don't have a lot of spell interaction, but you can't really afford to put too many spell interactions, only because number 1, the good spells are very, very expensive to play, which is why you don't play it cost-wise. And number 2, you need to have units to be able to take control of battlefields, and your biggest win condition is your Breakneck Mech. Your mechs have deflect and ganking, which is very, very strong, which is why playing Vile Maw isn't too big of an issue, because you're able to just swing your board left and right because you have the mechs. However, the biggest issue of this deck is that it's more minion focus and less spell focus, and that's usually the thing that hinders it. However, this deck is really strong. It's a good beginner deck, A little bit on the weaker side, but honestly, still pretty decent and can compete with all the other decks. The reason why we have Cleaves against the odds is just because these are just generically good cards for amp. Thermal Beams for anything with too much gear hate, and then Brindy here to be able to shut down anybody with a lot of hiddens like purple, or just green in general. Just anybody with combat tricks. Brindy here is just really good for baiting out combat tricks early so that you can move in safely without getting your units completely blown out of the water. Last but not least, probably the strongest deck in my favorite deck of the set that's relatively cheap in budget, Master Yi. Now, Master Yi, the cards you need are simply going to have to be from Proving Grounds, which can be quite expensive depending on where you get it, but if you can get MSRP, it's actually really good. But for the most part, this deck plays a lot of set 1 cards and some set 2 cards. So Master Yi Wuju Blade Master, while a friendly unit defense alone, it gets +2 might. Still very good passive, but definitely has been outshone by a lot. We're running a Master Yi Honed as the chosen champion. This one says when you enter, it enters ready, but it also has ganking. We're playing Battlefield's Grove of the God Willow, Balmaw, and also Obelisk. For cards, we're running 3 Charms, 3 Defies, 2 Punch First, 3 Disciplines, 3 Lonely Poros, 3 Pit Rookies, 3 Sea Monkeys, 2 Thwonks, 2 Zanya Hourglass, 3 Find Your Centers, 2 Akshans, 3 Navori Scouts, 3 Triforce, 3 Rune Runner, and also 1 Tiana Crown Guard. For the side deck, we have 2 Sabotage, 2 Unyielding, 2 Cannon Barrage, and 2 Not So Fast. Now, the core of this deck is just to be able to outvalue units with Lonely Poros, Sea Monkeys, and Pit Rookies. Because once again, this is 9 2 costs, which you want to have early on to be able to get your 2 cost drop. But we're also running cards like Sonya's Hourglass, only because it's cheaper than Guardian Angel. Guardian Angel is a bit more expensive. But we're also running relatively low power cards to no power cards with Navori Scout, Akshan, Ruin Runner. These are all cards that do not cost power, so you're able to maintain rune advantage quite hard. And the strategy is quite simple. You're playing around Triforce to be able to hold for dear life and win off of the extra points. And we're also playing around Rune Runner. Rune Runner with Master Yi is a 7 on defense. But if you add on a Triforce, it's a 9 on defense. And you also have cards like Thwonk, which prevents combat from happening if you're afraid of your units getting blown over. But you also have cards on the side like Not So Fast to be able to prevent your units from being targeted. Now, we are playing a single copy of Tiana Crown Guard because it comes in quite clutch. It's a little bit more of an expensive card, but stopping your opponent from being able to score points is so good. Now, Tiana is a 4 by herself, but she is technically a 6 defending with the legend ability of Master Yi. And you also have ways to be able to buff her up with Punch First, Disciplines, also Triforce. So there's ways to be able to get her might higher. You can make the consideration of having more gear in the deck, such as Bone Shiver, which is a little bit more expensive, and also Doran's Blade. You can have a lot more equipments to be able to make it so that your units are a lot more stickier, especially if you have a Rune Runner with a ton of equips on. I do find that Rune Runner is able to shut down a ton of deck archetypes. Purple cards, red cards, blue cards that target any cards that really want to mess you up. Rune Runner just basically says no. And the only way to deal with Rune Runner is either A, you call the weak it, or B, you get over it by swinging enough might over it. The reason why I like this deck so much is it's really, really strong, but honestly really cheap too. You don't have to spend, well, outside of the Proving Ground. Most cards here are relatively cheap and you don't have to worry about doing too much. Now, here are a couple of cards in each of the decks that you can add to be able to make them relatively more stronger so that they can play better. With the Fiora deck, it's already kind of built as is. You can make the consideration of adding Kiana instead. You can also add in more copies of a Bone Shiver. Bone Shiver and Lucian is a very good combination, so you can add in Bone Shivers they have more gears in it. But overall, this deck is sitting pretty good. You can play around with the numbers, but for the most part, the deck is quite strong as is. Now, specifically with Rumble, there are definitely a lot of cards that you can add to be able to make your deck a little bit stronger. You can definitely consider putting Kaisas as well as the gear that basically says when you equip this to a unit, it makes it a mech. So there are ways to be able to get around playing mechs. The only issue with Rumble is that the cards that you add to make it strong don't really synergize much. You can add cards like Time Warp, Thousand Tail Watcher to be able to just make your deck a little bit stronger, but even then, the deck starts to lose a little bit of its identity, but those are just like a couple of cards you can add to be able to make Rumble a bit stronger. Note to self, don't play kill spell cards like Singularity. Singularity's bait. We've tested it a lot. If you're not playing Kaisa, playing Singularity just feels so bad. Also, unless you're Victor as well. Last but not least, with specifically the Master Yi deck, the cards that you feel like you could add to make it a little bit better, outside of Triforce, you can add Hex Shrinkers, Dorn's Blade, or potentially even Bone Shiver. I would definitely value Dorn's Blade and Hex Shrinker a little bit better because the deflect is really annoying. With a little bit more, you can technically play cards like White Flame Protector, Deadbloom Predator. However, those cards have sort of already fallen off the map because they're not as strong with the prevalence of, well, purple for the most part, but also just people having a lot more might to be able to swing over with. However, these are just 3 decks that I find that are number one, budget, relatively easy to make, and for the most part cheaper, and also two, very strong competitively. We've played tested these decks quite a bit, and I will say that they still perform really well. Are they the top of the top? Not really. If anything, I would probably rate these decks a B tier deck. They're strong, they can compete, but they're definitely not A tier or S tier because those cards just do a lot more than what the deck has to offer. I would say out of the 3, the one that's probably the strongest, easiest to play, that's probably the quote unquote cheapest, I would say is definitely the Master Yi deck. Overall, just having 2 might is very strong. The game plan is really linear, but just because it's linear doesn't mean it's bad. There's a lot of options for this deck to be able to circumvent the meta, especially with cards like Unyielding Spear for damage, Sabotages for being able to break Dazzling. We also have Not So Fast to be able to deal with cards that actually target, like Singularity, So Fast, all that fun stuff. But overall, really fun decks that I've made. Quite strong. Let me know in the comment section down below what you guys think. Do you guys think these decks are good? Do you guys have any better alternatives for cheaper decks that are also really strong? Let me know in the comment section down below. Anyways, John Panio signing out. I'll see you guys in the next video. For now.